Can e-learning result in any kind of major behavioral change? That's a question we get asked a lot by clients. So we've all sat through some pretty terrible compliance training and some pretty boring e-learning where it's just a wall of text, we're sitting, we're passively reading, and honestly, we forget what we read 10 seconds later. I'd like to share a story that might change your mind a little bit. I was working for a big university and I was working on continuing teacher education. And my team was evaluating a series of branching scenarios. They were really cool. They were these branching scenarios that were developed by real world experts. So the one that I was looking at in particular was developed by a principal. You had just hired a brand new teacher. She was young. And in this scenario, you basically were being told by teachers at your school that this new teacher was dressing inappropriately. And you basically had to figure out how you were going to deal with it. Were you going to talk to the teacher directly? Were you going to get another teacher to do your dirty work for you? Or were you just going to ignore it? In the midst of making this decision, you got some new information that came in, and then you had to figure out, am I going to adjust? Am I going to do what I was going to do originally? If I set up a meeting with this teacher, am I just going to keep the meeting and have that discussion? Am I going to adjust? I've never been a principal before, right? But in this scenario, I thought the best thing to do would be just to be an adult and speak directly to the teacher, right? I'm going to set up a meeting and I'm going to do her the courtesy of actually talking to her directly about this issue instead of essentially getting somebody else to do it for me or just ignoring it. That seemed like a bad idea. And so the other thing that you had discovered in the midst of this scenario was that she apparently wasn't teaching some concept correctly. She had gone through some kind of a peer review and you got feedback from the peer reviewer that she wasn't teaching this math concept correctly. So honestly, I thought, well, I already have this meeting set up. I'm going to address both things at this meeting, right? I schedule another meeting. I thought, let's just discuss both in this meeting. And that was the wrong decision. I actually ended up, and I think it's probably worth mentioning in this scenario as well that I was very much a male principal. And I do think that actually has some bearing on the story, right? But basically, when I presented the fact that there were complaints about her dress and also that that the peer reviewer felt like she wasn't teaching the material correctly, her response to me was basically, and I actually understand this, that, oh, I see what's going on here, right? You don't think that young woman can teach math correctly, discriminated against, and basically she walks out of the room. And I was really floored at the end of that scenario. It was one of those, oh my gosh, like hindsight, right? Of course, I should have realized that was how that was going to come off. But I just genuinely, in my head, I was like, oh no, I already have a meeting scheduled with her. It seems weird to cancel that meeting. So why don't I just keep it on my calendar and I can discuss both issues at once? But I was really shaken at the end of that and was, oh my gosh, I totally should have realized that was going to happen, but I didn't. I just really seemed like the best way to handle the scenario. And I just remember at the very end of the simulation, you get a voicemail from your superintendent basically letting you know that she has sued the school district. So at the end of the scenario, I was just like, oh my God, I just got the school district sued. So a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. I probably that was probably over 10 years ago now that I looked at that. And it still really stands out in my mind. I still remember how kind of shook I was that I read the situation so badly. I chose so incorrectly. And it was just totally the wrong way to handle that entire situation. The second thing I think is worth mentioning again, I was doing this scenario very much from the position of a male principal. And I think that illustrates how a really good scenario, right? Really good e-learning can put you in someone else's shoes. I'm not a man. I have never walked through the world as a man. You know what I mean? It really did allow me to, I guess, empathize or to see a situation from a different perspective. So I think that's really powerful as well. It really puts you in the shoes of someone else and allows you to see the world from their perspective. And the other thing that I think it's worth mentioning, right, is that it allows you to fail safely. I got the school district sued, but not for real. I didn't lose my job. I didn't cost my company any money. I didn't bring a lawsuit upon my employer. So it also shows, too, like I said, I was so confident that I was handling things the right way. I really felt like, oh, I got this. And then I was so spectacularly wrong. And I think it's just a great example of the fact that if you allow people to fail in an e-learning type of situation, no one gets hurt. I got to go back and make different choices and see how the situation played out in different ways, which was really valuable. I was able to extrapolate, here's where I went wrong, here's maybe what I could have done if I had done it this way instead. It still wasn't going to be a fun conversation, right? But it didn't end with the school district getting sued. So it allows people to fail safely. And I think really the key is action, right? It's application. It's not just passive, I'm going to watch a video or read some text and forget about it 5 minutes later. And I think honestly can be a better experience for folks in even face-to-face learning, because certainly you can do simulations in a classroom. You can have people get together and role play. But a lot of times what ends up happening is like two inexperienced people are trying to role play a situation. They don't really know how it's going to go. So in an e-learning and a branching scenario like that, you as the expert, you can make it very realistic. You can give them a very realistic from your own experience, or if you're interviewing subject matter experts or you're talking to friends, you're talking to people in your network, you can gather stories and you can glean, here's what really happens in the real world. So anyway, I just wanted to add some perspective. Like I said, this happened over 10 years ago and I still remember it so very clearly, that feeling of just gut shock. And I got something so wrong and had such a negative consequence for myself and for my employer. So, well, my fake employer. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you and I hope it is helpful. If you have any questions about how you might design a branching scenario or some kind of other interactive e-learning activity, let me know. I really love doing this kind of work and I would be happy to give you some pointers.